Welcome to Mission Majjhima, Ajahn. Ajahn, so tell us about Majjhima 86, the Aṅgulimāla Sutta.
So the Aṅgulimāla Sutta is one of the most well-known discourses in the canon because of just the power of the narrative and the story it tells and what implications that has for those of us who have transgressed in our own histories as well, although hopefully not quite this badly. It involves the killer named Aṅgulimāla, which means finger garland, who's terrorizing the kingdom of Kosala, which was just to the north of Magadha, and is the realm of King Pasenadi, where the Buddha spent many years. So Aṅgulimāla is a sort of notorious bandit who was known for taking the fingers of those that he killed and stringing them in a garland around his neck. The sutta begins with the Buddha going for alms, finishing and then going on the road that Aṅgulimāla would basically detain and then kill and rob people on. The Buddha is warned numerous times to not go forward, to not wander into this realm of danger, and he continues until Aṅgulimāla sees him and thinking, people travel this road in groups of 10 or 20, why don't I take this one recluse's life? And he chases the Buddha, but is unable to catch him because the Buddha performs a feat of psychic power where he just keeps being as far away from Aṅgulimāla as he was before, no matter how fast Aṅgulimāla runs. And eventually Aṅgulimāla yells, "Stop, stop, ascetic." And the Buddha says, "I have stopped." And it's this beautiful dialogue where the Buddha says, I have stopped because I do not harm living beings. It is you, Aṅgulimāla, who have no regard for life, who have not stopped. Just this amazing implication for what it means to stop truly in the heart, creating karma and more. This affects Aṅgulimāla. He gains immediate faith and understands that the Buddha came here out of compassion for him specifically, and that does the trick. And suddenly he throws his weapons away and becomes the Buddha's attendant and goes for refuge and follows the Buddha back to the city. And this isn't somewhat unheard of. There's a story with Longpo Cha. There's a gangster from Rayong who near where I ordained, who went and served as Longpo Cha's attendant for about 2 weeks. And when he went back to Rayong, where he told his entire gang that they'd be holding the 5 precepts from then on. That required negotiation, and eventually actually he was killed by a rival gang, but in the meantime he knew that was going to happen and made sure his family was provided for and really lived the last years of his life with a sense of deep virtue. It's a profoundly affecting story. So this redemption is not unheard of. And similarly, we know a monk, Longpo Kemadama, who has started the Aṅgulimāla prison project, which has been running for 40 years in England, where it's basically prison chaplaincy for those who have, fallen from the root of virtue and come back through spiritual teachings. So this story has deep resonance. The Buddha returns to the city, and King Pasenadi, who's being accosted by his countryfolk about this bandit, comes to the Buddha, asks, "What do I do about this bandit?" And the Buddha says, "What would you do if you knew that he'd taken on the holy life?" And King Pasenadi says, "I would rise in respect to him." And the Buddha says, "Here's Aṅgulimāla," and it's the big reveal. And what's fascinating is there's a beautiful motion here where King Pasenadi, instead of calling him by Aṅgulimāla, that old name, which means finger garland, he asks what his mother and father's name is and then calls him by that new name. It's this beautiful motion. And later on, we learn that Aṅgulimāla goes by the name Ahimsa, harmlessness, after this, which is this amazing motion transformation of heart. Aṅgulimāla then goes in the city and sees a woman pregnant, has compassion for her child, and the Buddha tells him to go make a declaration of truth that since his noble birth as an ordained person or as a noble being, he has not hurt a living being. And by that declaration of truth, may this woman's child be well. And this remains a blessing which we still give in Buddhist countries. And then finally, a very affecting episode where his karma comes back to him and he's on alms round, and the village folk are throwing rocks at him and beating him. And he comes back bloodied. And the Buddha says, "Bear it, Brahmin. The karma you're experiencing now would have been a much deeper suffering through eons in hell, if not for manifesting at this moment. And then Aṅgulimāla utters these beautiful verses. So in here, there's notes of redemption, notes that none of us are too far gone to find awakening, notes that just this motion between violence and sometimes finding the complete opposite of harmlessness and compassion hiding there in someone's heart, and Aṅgulimāla's spontaneous compassion, and then notes of how to bear karma that comes for us in the end, even if it's difficult. Bear it, Brahman. So what would you draw out of this discourse, Ajahn?
Yeah, so as you noted, this is probably one of the most famous narrative stories from the time of the Buddha, and you see it, any biography of the Buddha, certainly popular biographies in any Buddhist country, and any kind of film adaptation of the Buddha's life, you'll have the episode of Aṅgulimāla, or multiple episodes, just because it is such a graphic tale of redemption and the Buddha's response, just recognizing that even though this mass murder, had actually done far worse karma than any of us have, still, the Buddha is, willing to seize the potential in Aṅgulimāla's heart and gives him ordination. So people can look up more about Aṅgulimāla. You can watch YouTube videos. There's a lot on that. But something which I found striking in this most recent reading is just the poetry of the sutta, from Aṅgulimāla himself. I mean, the last third or last fourth of the sutta is just Aṅgulimāla's his own poetry, spontaneous poetry upon attaining awakening. And also that verse that the Buddha gives him, which you highlighted as being a verse which we still chant kind of as a protective chant for mothers to be. And in my life, when my sister was pregnant, and I've had monk brothers who had relatives that were pregnant, we will chant this on a daily basis. Yatohang bhagini ariyaya jatiya jato nabijanami sanchitjapanang jivita boro peta tena sachena sotite hotu sotigabasa. So since attaining this noble birth, I have not intentionally taken the life of any living being. By the asseveration of this truth, tena sachena, and this is a phrase, tena satyena, which goes back to the Rig Veda, and just the pointing to the power, tena sachena, sotite hotu gabasa, sotite hotu, may you be well, and may the embryo in your womb be well as well. So it's fascinating, this principle, how strong, or what can be the effect of making such an asseveration of truth. Some of the poetry which the Aṅgulimāla spontaneously creates is still chanted as well. Several of the verses are in the Dhammapada, the chapter on heedfulness, and the chapter on the world. So one chant sometimes when monastics, when we're taking leave from one another, will ask forgiveness, and the senior monk, after they themselves asking forgiveness, will give kind of a blessing chant as we junior monks lean in and kind of take the full brunt of the blessing, so to speak. One of them is Yopubeva pamajjiva pachaso na pamajjati somang lokam pabaseti abhamuto achandima. So just as someone who formerly was heedless and then corrects their ways, they brighten the world just as the moon coming out from behind clouds. And several other just beautiful poems about formerly being heedless and giving up heedlessness for heedfulness. Really the basic story, if you read the sutta, it's much more bare bones than what you get in these commentarial stories, which go into Aṅgulimāla's supposed past. Here's just one of abject redemption and care and seeing spiritual potential. So, Ajahn, would you want to draw anything else out?
Just singling out that principle of how when karma manifests, it can manifest different ways depending on the state of our heart. Many will be familiar with the sutta about the lump of salt, where the Buddha says the results of a past negative action manifesting in a constricted mind are like a drop of salt or a pinch of salt dropped in a glass of water, and it changes the whole flavor of the glass of water. Whereas when the results of past negative action manifest in a mind expanded by the Brahma Viharas, these states of loving kindness, it can manifest just a teeny bit, barely at all, like a pinch of salt dropped in the Ganges River would hardly change the taste even a little bit. And just to know we aren't complete victims to our past karma, just as Aṅgulimāla had to bear beatings and stones but the karma could have been much worse. Even so, if we develop the heart as broad and loving, it's a protection against the mistakes we all have inevitably made in the past. So a beautiful principle instantiated even here.
So Ajahn, what is the word of the week?
The word of the week is ahimsa, which means harmlessness, nonviolence. And it comes from the root his, which means to harm, to hurt. And is the negative prefix, so non-hurting, non-harming. It's a beautiful principle to live by.
All right, well, let's be as harmless as we can be this next week, and we'll see you over on Zoom in just a few moments, or see you next week for Majjhima 87. Ajahn.
Ajahn.